Okay. Right now, I'm pleased to introduce Kerry McQuisten. Did I get that right? Okay. Kerry McQuisten is from Oregon. She was a candidate for the governor of Oregon, and she's going to be speaking to us about the importance of grassroots organizations in your campaign organization. Is that correct? Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, how does that sound? Good? Excellent. So I am here today basically to say why the gentlemen who just spoke before me are absolutely correct and what all of that looks like in a grassroots gubernatorial campaign. So I'll just tell you my story. I was raised on a cattle ranch in the northeast corner of the state of Oregon, about an hour from the Idaho state border. And back during COVID, when the entire COVID debacle broke loose, I was raising my daughter. I was running the small business that I started. I was happy, not too far into politics, but I had never seen such a grab for our freedoms in my adult life. And I couldn't stop myself. I had to get out there and actually do something. Now, at the time in Oregon, we had a governor named Kate Brown. Now, Kate Brown was, in my words, a tyrant. The policies that she was putting into place were absolutely draconian, was the word that kept coming to mind. We were one of the first states to close. We were shut down, locked down the hardest, and we were one of the last states to open. Now, in my neck of the woods, we also had a very liberal, left-leaning city council and mayor. And those folks had shut down city council. The meetings that should have been open to the public were not. Everything was closed. Our healthcare workers were told if you didn't get the jab, you were out of a job. We were close enough to a little bit of freedom in Idaho that our businesses were shutting down and moving an hour across the state line because why wouldn't you? Didn't make any sense to sit there in deep blue Oregon and suffer. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to run for city council. And I did, and I ended up becoming the mayor of Baker City. And we flipped that town's council from blue to red. Now, it's like, yay! So what we did at the time is push back a little bit harder than that, because the more I listened to Kate Brown and her people, her appointed bureaucrats on all of these boards and commissions, the angrier I got. I authored a resolution, and the resolution, the media called it the Common Sense Sanctuary. But what it really was doing was declaring a crisis against what our government was doing to our small community. Now, in Northeast Oregon, we had maybe half a dozen folks die with COVID, and I say with COVID, not of COVID. One example comes to mind. We had an elderly gentleman who was up on a ladder doing repair work, 7 feet up in the air, fell down, hit his head, broke his neck, and he was diagnosed as one of our COVID deaths. Doesn't make sense. I started noticing on the city budgets, they were saying the deaths were increasing in our area, but the income and the revenue from our cemetery had not increased. Why was that? We were not being impacted in the way our governor was saying that we were, and we needed to open up. So when I became mayor, we passed this resolution, and it declared a crisis on mental health, economics, financial, all the way across. We had 3 young men commit suicide in the week that I was elected mayor. This is very abnormal for a town the size of 10,000. National media picked this up, and they ran with it, and I ended up on Fox News. And the groundswell of requests from people across my state saying, can you please run for governor, grew and grew and grew. You couldn't get any more grassroots than my candidacy. I came from a cattle ranch running a small business, and here I am, and I decided to run for governor. And there are some things that I did well on instincts and some things that I could have used a little bit of help with if I had known David and Corey at the time. So I hit the ground running, and we had a network across all 36 counties. We worked social media. We worked things on the ground, boots on the ground, more than any establishment swamp creature is ever going to attempt to do, because I was doing this not for a title, but because I loved my state, I loved my county, and I wanted to make a difference. And so I was out there constantly, and I thought, okay, if I can just work a little bit harder than the other candidates, see more people do more and run a campaign like they hadn't seen before, maybe we could take this state. And I worked it constantly, and I was doing very well up until the swamp kicked in. And so right about a month before the primary, here's where my media story happens. So I knew at the time that Oregon was very divided between blue and red. We were very polarized, but most of our counties were red, and the high population counties around the Portland-Salem area are mostly blue, deep blue. And so I decided to look at my people, look at what each area wanted, and I knew for an absolute fact, based on our voting numbers out there, that if a moderate milquetoast candidate got through that primary, we were going to lose the general election and we would lose the governor's seat to a Democrat again. Because the people in my congressional district are conservative, and they sit on their ballots and they don't turn them in for someone who comes from the establishment. And so we needed a grassroots candidate more than anything at that point. And so the debates were coming up. And at that point, I had been doing more with about $1 for what every $5 my competition had been spending. So I knew that I was being effective out on the ground. Here's where this comes in, the media. We went into a media blackout with my campaign. And here's how that looked. The media decided to set some goalposts, or some goals, and the goalposts kept moving along the line. The first one was, have to have $100,000 in donations come in if you want to make the debate stage. Great, I met that. I had $5, $10, $100 donations, and we met that when it came in. They changed the goalpost again. Okay, 1,000 separate individual donors. Made that. Had to do well in this poll. Did that. They kept moving it. Well, take away the in-kind donations. Those don't count in your 1,000. Fine. I met that as well. So I was still on that debate stage a month before the votes would happen. They made one final move of that goalpost. And that move was, okay, we're going to depend on a poll, and that poll is what's going to determine who makes the debate stage. So there's a lobbyist in Oregon, and this lobbyist happens to own a polling company. This lobbyist also happened to only donate to the Democrats or to one of my opponents on the Republican side. So you can see where this is going, right? The poll was done with maybe 150 people polled within a couple hours statewide. We had some evidence that people were called ahead of time and pre-screened on their responses. I know one individual personally who was argued with on the phone when he said that, yes, I would vote for Kerry. And so that I was barred from the debate stage. And that's how that exactly went down. And at the minute that happened, I knew that we had lost not only the general election that the Democrat was going to win. And that's the most frustrating part right there. That's why we need heavy hitters to run a boot camp, to come in and network, to do something for grassroots candidates, because that's the point where I had been running on instinct and the knowledge I had and done well up to that point, but I needed resources to come in at the grassroots level and help. We could have flipped that state red if we had been a little more organized and a little more focused. And so we did. We went on to lose the general election. And my message to you today is that it is so important to recruit good, solid, principled grassroots people and get behind them. Because if you're coming from the swamp and you're an establishment politician, you're looking for that title. You're looking for power and influence. You're not looking to save your family. You're not the mama bears out there fighting for your children. You're not the people fighting for small business. The grassroots absolutely is. And so when David and Corey stand here and talk about supporting and finding viable grassroots candidates, that's exactly what we need to do and what Republicans overseas can help with. So please support this organization if you can. Thank you very much.
Kerry. If there are one or two questions, we have time for some very quick questions for Kerry, if there are any.
Do you have any questions? Okay. Nope.
How much were you able to raise? How did you find raising money for your campaign?
It's always tough in Oregon. I think I was somewhere over 300 and something thousand. Yeah. But Oregon's tough, and being a blue state, I disagree with the point that only the swing states are where we should focus. Because if we focus on our deep blue states, we could start making them a little less deep blue and swing them eventually. If we abandon these states, then people flee these states. That spread of liberalism is just going to spread state to state to state. We have to draw the line and hold it somewhere.
I was just wondering that since you had to have a certain number of people donate to your campaign, and Oregon is, typically such a blue, how did you physically, what were your methods to get the different numbers of people to donate?
I was heavily on social media, and I was heavily boots on the ground, county to county to county. We had some of these candidates who actually did not even get out to the majority of the counties. They came out and they did 1 or 2 events in the entire season and did nothing. So my theory was if I worked just a little bit harder and got out there, I could do it. But I'll tell you, the media blackout was so extreme in Oregon. On election night during my watch party, they would put the establishment candidates' photos up on the screen, and when the number counts would come in and flip back and forth, and I'd come up second place or third place, they would keep the establishment candidates on there and not mention my name. I ended up at the end of this race winning the second largest number of counties, if you look at it that way, in the state. I took the entire eastern half of the state of Oregon. That's never been mentioned. My name has never been mentioned again. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kerry. A pleasure listening to you. And now we will move on to the next panel, I believe.
Sounds good. Thank you.